Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this 300th episode, we're chatting with the man, the myth, the legend himself, the president of the Dice Tower, the one and only Tom Vasel. Tom, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Good. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
The appreciation is definitely coming from this side, my friend. For the 300th episode, I just said before we went on air, I was trying to think, it was like a 10-second thought process of who we need to have on here for the 300th episode. It was not a question in my mind.
300 episodes to bring me on. 300th in line is what I see.
Well, I was saving it, right? I was saving like the big one for the man, for the face of the industry. And I think, is that fair to say that you're like the face or one of the faces of the industry? Do you ever see yourself that way?
It's really not. I'm a face of the industry, right? Because by very nature, the people who are putting themselves out there, whether YouTube or whatever, people know them more than they know designers and publishers, but those are the people who make things work. If something happened to me today, the industry would be just fine. So people know who we are, and we definitely do a lot of promotion. But at the end of the day, there are many, many, many important people behind the scenes you just don't see.
Yeah. I think the history as well of you being in this industry, right? If I go back, like I was actually shocked. I would have expected that, in most of the industry, people are, 5, 10, 15 years. I would have pegged you around kind of the 10 to 15 years, but I mean, you're over 20 years in this industry, right?
22.
Yeah.
But who's counting? No, I mean, it's been a while. It's not been half my life yet. But we're getting there.
Yeah, it's so if I was looking at your kind of your background credentials, I mean, did I read that you started as a math teacher?
Well, I mean, I was a math teacher when I started.
Like your career, yeah.
When I started the Dice Tower, but I mean, I didn't start that way. I started as a baby. And math teacher was my first job. I had many different jobs, various jobs, but it was my career at the time, was being a teacher. That was even something I had never planned on doing. I just kind of stumbled across it. I never even wanted to be a teacher.
How did you end up being a teacher when you don't want to be a teacher?
Well, I was in Florida and my job options had dried up and I had no real clear, you know, idea of what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And my wife's father was working in Korea as an English teacher, and he said, "Come on out and teach English. It's good money, blah, blah, blah." And I thought, it'd be nice for a change of pace. I told my wife we do it for 6 months. And we ended up staying out there for 10 years. But after a couple of years, I thought, maybe I don't want to work for my father-in-law. So I looked for another job, and I got one at an international school, and they had a math position open. And I was like, I like math. So that's kind of how that came into being. And I really like teaching math, so it worked out well.
And then you were also a youth pastor for a while, is right? Like, as
Sure, I'm involved in any church that I'm part of, ever since, well, my whole life. Even in college, I was associate pastor of a church for a while, right out of college. So I just was in charge of the youth in Korea for a while. Then even when I came back to America.
And then, so at that, how did that then get in? Like, how did you get to board games from teacher and youth pastor? Like, I would guess that there's some kind of like, learning through play and things like that might be a component of that. Or was board game something completely separate that was just part of your hobbies? Or
I like doing board games. I mean, my whole life, right? But I also like doing something, right? I don't want to sit around and be passive.
Yeah.
I've never been someone who wants to be passive. So I want to have some sort of hobby, something to do. Even back when I first was playing Warhammer 40K back in college, or actually even before that, I'm sorry, I was playing Overpower, collectible card game. I made a web page about it because I thought, well, let's talk about this. And I went and I got a notebook and I went through and did every card in the game. I figured out their codes. I did some maths and I made a web page for Overpower. That web page, long gone now, GeoCities. And so then Warhammer 40K came and I did the same thing. So when I started playing board games more aggressively, I played board games my whole life, but when I moved to Korea, I wanted something I could do with my wife. She, for some odd reason, didn't want to play Warhammer 40K. And so I was like, oh, I like board games. So I started getting board games and I wasn't going to do nothing. Like I said, I didn't want to be passive. So I was like, meh, I'll start talking about board games and writing reviews.
And literally, that's how you got into it, just out of boredom. It's like, oh, this will give me something to do.
It's not saying out of boredom is not necessarily. I mean, it's to prevent boredom, I guess. It's not
That's
because
fair.
I was bored. It's just because I want to do something, and I liked partaking in the board game community. I learned a lot about board games, and I thought, well, I would like to tell people about board games I found.
I guess the parallel there would be like COVID recently, right? Like the number of publishers or designers that kind of sprung up, because of COVID. And COVID doesn't, and again, back to your point, wasn't necessarily to, feed their boredom, but it was more, okay, I have an opportunity now, right? I have some time available to pursue something that's kind of interested in me. And now I'm going to kind of take my shot at it. And we've seen these designers and publishers spring up during COVID, right?
Yeah, again, I think that also is more boredom than anything else. And I've done things with boredom, but my goal was also, I'm like, whatever I do, I'm gonna keep doing it. That's I've always gone everything with a long term idea in my head. It doesn't always work. Like when I first went to Korea, I wrote 2 page, 3 page mission letters to people. I would like, here's all the things, and I'd make it funny and interesting because I just wanted to do something. I'm like, I'll keep doing this forever. But a lot of ideas I have don't work out obviously forever. They go away or something changes. But the board game thing, when I started writing reviews, people liked it. I thought this is something I could do. I really enjoy this. It's a nice hobby. It's something I can do on the side.
And when did that side hustle start turning into something more serious for you? Like when did it, like the Dice Tower officially kind of become a thing?
Well, I mean, everything is very flowing. I mean, the Dice Tower name became a name,
Hmm.
and I think was it 2008. I'm not sure what the year was when we started the podcast. We needed a name, and by episode 3, we had the name Dice Tower, and then I just stuck with that. Before that, it was just Tom Vasel. I put everything under my name, but I didn't really like that, and I still don't love that. I like the idea of having an organizational name so that it's
Yeah.
more than just me. Although at the time that didn't even come into my brain to have other people involved. I mean, I would do stuff with other people, but I couldn't even imagine it being more than one person really. And so, I did it in Korea. It was a hobby it, for 10 years. I always tell people you want to make money from board games, do it 10 years for free. Um, but I remember distinctly, a tiny bit of income was coming in from the Dice Tower.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, I'm just so overworked. I teach all day. I'm involved in my church. I have a family, and I'm doing board games, and something has got to give. And so the idea was like, well, what if you did board games full time? And I thought, I could never. I called some people who I trusted and talked to them. I knew some people who did things like on their own. I thought, okay, what if I taught online? What if I worked for someone else in board gaming part time? What are ways that I could get enough money to do it? So I brought my wife and she did not immediately shoot it down. So I was like, oh, maybe, and I finally decided to do it. I told, I told the school, which was not happy, um, and made that jump, and it was pretty scary that first 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
I was it. I don't remember if it was 6 or 7, but it was yeah about 7 months. And then I finally thought I'll run a Kickstarter and see how that works. And once the Kickstarter went off, we were like, wow, okay, maybe this can work. We can pull this off. It's up to that point we were just scraping by. Um, so I mean, not that we're wealthy by any means, but man, I wondered. But I was never that worried about. I was like, no matter what, I will provide for my family. I'll
Yeah.
do something. I'll get some sort of extra job, odd job. I'll do whatever it takes. And it worked out okay.
You always say no one's driving Lambos, making board games or in the board game industry, right? Like it's possible to survive, right, and make a living
Well,
out of it.
there's a few
Yeah.
wealthy people in the industry for sure. I mean, if you
Yeah.
Richard Garfield, I'm sure, is quite wealthy, and there's other designers who've sold millions of games, but it's probably less than 100 people who are wealthy from board games.
Yeah, is like making the NHL, right? It's the same kind of odds, I'm sure, in terms of making. You actually had done a game yourself. Was it Vicious Fishes? Was that your first attempt at putting a game out there?
Sure, Vicious Fishes, which is it's kind of a funny thing because even now I think I rate the game a 6. Um, I'm like it's okay, and when I pitch to designers or publishers, I'd be like, yeah, it's not that great, you know. And Nestor Games picked it up, which was nice of them, but it didn't do well. Nothing Personal was a better success. I
Yeah,
want to say 6, 7 thousand copies of that are out there. I don't know. Maybe it's 10,000 because they're usually in round numbers. But
yeah.
that one did better. But I'm not really a designer. I mean, I did it. I had a co-designer, Steve Avery, and he did a lot of the work. Um, and I have ideas floating around my head, but I like playing games and talking about them more than designing them.
Is there ever any thoughts to go back to some of those games with what you know now and say, okay, now that I've literally played thousands of games and reviewed thousands of games, here's how I would adjust this to make this even better?
I
Or
can't fix Vicious Fishes. I've thought about it. I can't figure it out. Nothing Personal. I've definitely thought about rehauling it, retheming it, redoing it, and it'd be a completely different game. And then I think about something else, and I just never got back to it.
yeah. And so the Dice Tower is continued to grow. I think is there like 3 podcasts you have now? There's like one that's like the audio from the show. There's another one still.
Well, I mean, the main thing for the Dice Tower is our YouTube channel for
Yeah.
sure. And then I would say the second thing for the Dice Tower is, and pretty close after the YouTube channel, is our conventions.
Mm.
Because we have Dice Tower East, Dice Tower West, the cruise and the retreat. And then um and then there's an audio podcast that I do called At the Table with Tom and Eric and Julie.
Yep.
And that's about board games. And the audio podcast you mentioned, Dice Tower Audio, is it's basically just a podcast that we put together that is some of the audio from some of our YouTube videos.
Yeah, I thought that was a clever idea because, like, I think often I'll be in the car and I'm wanting to listen to like a video, like a show that's on YouTube, and so I'll literally, but you obviously can't have it in front of you, so I'll kind of put it on the seat and try to have it playing so I can hear the audio. But to be able to take an audio from a show and just put it into that kind of a format where people can just hit the button and listen to the next kind of episode of this week's news, I think was pretty clever. Um,
I don't know if it's that clever. I mean,
well, that's clever.
lots of people suggested it, so I was like, well, I guess we should do it.
And then so how did you decide to get into like the conventions? Like, what point did that come about where you're like, okay, we think we can kind of take this, evolve this to the next level? Was it a natural evolution for you, or was it something that
Everything is kind of just steps.
Yeah.
I have ideas. I think about them. Someone else started a convention, and we joined in and helped them. And then as time went by, someone kept bugging me to do a cruise, and I was like, I don't think we can pull a cruise off. So then we started that, and then someone approached me and said, hey, I'll run Dice Tower West. And I thought, okay. And each of these things came about kind of in a small way, but now they're a big deal. Like right now, I mean, when I'm done with this podcast, one of the things I'm working on today is Dice Tower East, which is 1 week from today in Orlando.
Yeah. And you personally show up to all the conventions as well, right? Like,
I feel like I should.
Yeah, of course.
They have my name on them.
No, but I mean, even all the conventions,
really
right? Like, were you just at Origins?
I don't go to all the cons. I was not at Origins. You have to pick and choose, I think. Yes. Here's the thing, and this is something I would say to almost any content creator out there. You can go around, you can flit around all the conventions and stuff.
Yeah.
You can go to a convention. You can go to, I think, you can easily go to 1 or 2 every month. But when are you going to do content? I mean, you could do content about the conventions, but that's not that interesting. People are here about that a bit, but they're mostly here about board games.
Yeah.
So I have to pick and choose. I try to go, I go to my 4 conventions, and then I go to Gen Con and Essen because they're the 2 biggest in the industry.
Yeah,
so
that's Essen last year. Yeah.
So that's every other month. And then after that, I'll go to maybe 2 or 3 others. So it's between 6 to 9. Like we're going to World Series of Board Gaming this year. I went to Board Game Geek Spring. So that's 8 this year. That's 8 out of 12 months where you're gone for essentially a week.
Yeah.
Of your life. And that's fine. But and 8 out of 52 is it's 1/4 almost. So I have to think that time, so I have to make some cuts. I would love to go to Origins. I'd love to go to PAX. I'd love to go to any convention. Invite me to a convention. Maybe I'll come. But you can't go to all of them. So I have to make those choices.
How do you manage your time? So if I think back to Essen last year, right? So I saw you at I think it was the backer kit. You're near the backer kit in the Kickstarter booths. They're right beside each other, and it was after hours. It was like I think it was either setup night or maybe it's the night the second night or something like this. And there's like a mob around you, right? And I think I've seen you at other conventions. There's always seems to be a mob around you, and to me, I would find that. Obviously, it's invigorating because I think very complimentary that people see you in almost like a celebrity light, right? Or not almost, they do see you in a celebrity light, but you have to be on all the time, right? And as you just said, 8 months of the year you're at these conventions, and for like 5 days straight, you've got a crowd of people wanting kind of a little piece of your time, and hearing a little story or want to talk to you about something in history that they're passionate about. How at some point you must get is exhaustion ever hit you? Like, how do you manage that?
Well, first of all, if you see me in a mob, it's because I went and stood in the mob. Not that they're gathering around me. It is exhausting.
Yeah.
So, but what I do is I'm very strict about it. At cons, almost always 10 o'clock, I go to bed.
Yeah.
Or at least I go lay down in bed, right? And I spend some time there by myself. I usually take one meal, usually breakfast or lunch, maybe, and I just go by myself, or I go with one or two people, and I just have some time there where I take time away from cons. And I'm not around people all the time, other than this guy who's cutting the grass right behind my ear here.
Yeah.
I'm not around people all the time. So cons to me are really invigorating because the internet is a rude, mean, terrible, dreadful.
Yeah.
I can't say enough bad things about internet crowds. Now, taking into effect that also the internet also is our fan base. We have wonderful Facebook groups. We have terrific interactions. But there's a few people out there, and I shouldn't even say a few. I would say probably 1 out of 10 people on the internet is just not very nice. And they can dominate conversations and make it feel like everything's not worth it. But go to a convention and you feel uplifted. People are very rarely negative at a con.
It's a love fest.
In a very good mood.
Oh yeah.
And very nice. And it charges me. I come back tired from them, but ready to go.
Yeah. And when I see you at the conventions, you can see you from a mile away. First, you're much taller in person than I realized. But the iconic look, right? Like the hat and the suspenders, and when did that come about? When did the kind of where you kind of lock in the look to say, okay, this is now my identity, and I'm going to kind of lock this in. Was that ever like a conscious thought, or how did that kind of come about?
I've worn ties for a good chunk of my life. I had to wear them in school when I was a kid, and when I was a teacher, I think we had to wear a tie. I don't remember if we had to wear a tie. Maybe we didn't, but I feel like maybe we did. I don't know. And I was like, well, if I'm going to wear a tie, I'm going to wear colorful ties. So I've done that my whole life. The suspenders thing just came as I became an adult. I'm like, I like suspenders, so I'd wear these. I wear these no matter what, even if you don't see them, they're underneath another shirt. But the hat thing, I've always wanted fedoras my whole life. They're just very expensive. I never had them as a kid, and I just started wearing them. So the look kind of just gelled. It's not something I wear all the time. I don't wear the hat. In fact, I have to quick throw this hat on that doesn't match because I didn't realize this was going to be video.
You make it work. It looks good.
Sure, but I don't like walk around the studio wearing a hat usually, unless I forget to take one off. I wear them when I go outside because they're dual useful against the sun and the rain. And I wear them when I do videos, but I don't walk around the house wearing that. Now I do wear a tie most days. Sometimes I'll wear, a Cuban shirt because I find those to be very comfortable. So I kind of switch back and forth between that.
This industry has changed quite, like 20 years or 20 some odd, 22 years. You must have seen obviously a lot of change in this industry, and you've been part of obviously a lot of the change in this industry. Is there anything that you can kind of put your thumb on where you can say this is something that is maybe a shift that you didn't see coming or you didn't expect, but now that you embrace as kind of the new way things are working?
Probably Kickstarter. I mean, the biggest change in the industry is the internet in general,
Yeah.
because it's made games accessible to everybody. The internet came out the same time that Settlers of Catan and Magic the Gathering came out, and those three things were such a huge driving force that changed the industry forever.
Yeah.
In the past 15 years, Kickstarter has changed things, and by Kickstarter, by extension, crowdfunding, I guess, now. And that's changed things, and it's made it easier for people to get things published. It has also produced such a wide array of noise
Yeah.
that it's almost impossible to find. I mean, you publish a game, have fun getting anyone to notice it. It's next to impossible. You just
Yeah.
have to have a great game and be in the right spot at the right time. Um, and for consumers, even worse, right? You're like, well, I don't know what games are good or not, and there's a huge amount of noise out there with content creation, in all industries. If I want to find out about something, like this weekend, the new expansion for Elden Ring dropped, and you can go and see 600 million reviews on it, and that's an exaggeration, but not by much.
Yeah.
So there's just so much out there, and that's the biggest change in industry. It's just there's just so much stuff, and it can feel overwhelming both as a consumer or as someone in the industry. But I think for me, I just come to the realization I can't do everything, and even the Dice Tower staff can't do everything. I've got several reviewers working for me now. We can't cover all the games. That's okay. People will yell at us. You never covered game X. It's okay. I'm okay with that. I have to be, or
Yeah.
you would go mad.
How big is the team now? And like there, and as I said earlier on, there's most publishers in the industry, for instance, they're 1 to 3 people, and then they've got like a wide network that kind of plug into that as kind of an extension of the company. How big is your core kind of team versus kind of the network that you guys operate in?
Well, here in the studio, we have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, including me. So 9 people here in the studio.
Wow.
That's not two of them are part time, but that's 9 with 2 part time, and then we also have Mike Delicio, so that makes 10. So there's the core team of 10, but then I'm always afraid to say core team. We got 2 people, 3 people doing Kickstarter previews. We got one person helping with the internet. We got Eric and Julie, who are hosts on the podcast. And then other people who do things. Sam Healy's part time. So it's about 15 to 20 people in total.
Wow. In like with any business, you kind of run into this thing where, you know, employees help bring additional help to shoulder the load, but then you also have more mouths to feed, right? So that engine now has to
Oh my word, yes.
create even more content to now feed the mouths that you just added to the team. And how was that balance for you?
It's interesting because I'm not necessarily following my own advice. When someone comes to me and they say I have a board game, should I self-publish? I always tell them no. Like
Mm,
every time, straight up. I always say, what is your goal in life? Is your goal to design board games, or is it to run a publishing house? Because they're really 2 different things.
yeah.
Um, to publish your own game is a lot of work. You do a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of reasons people do it, but it's usually because they just want control, or no one else wants to publish your game because it's terrible, or they think they'll make more money that way, which they will, for the expense of doing 10 times the amount of work.
Yeah.
But those are the 3 main reasons people do it. And I always say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And so it's the same thing here. I want to review games, but I also started a business. So nowadays, I really do spend a ton of time on the business. Now I'm learning, I'm working, I'm getting people in to help me run the business part of things, and I make sure that I'm still doing a ton of playing and reviewing of games. And so that keeps me sane. The Dice Tower is way more work than people might think. I mean, I showed you my thing earlier. So this is a list of every week I write out a list of things I have to do. Now, I have done a good chunk of these things already by Monday morning, but some of these things take longer than others, and there's just a lot going on. But I work really hard to get all this stuff done, to work at it, and then I hope to hire people and bring on people who have just as hard of a work ethic.
Is there ever a time when you have to kind of take a step back and almost unplug yourself from gaming? Like I gotta think with anything, right? Like you're living the dream. Obviously, your job is your passion, right? But now it's your job, right? And everybody usually needs some kind of reprieve from their day to day job. Is there at any point in your life where or your day to day where you have to say, okay, I got to go non gaming for just to kind of detox my mind for a second here? Does that ever
Well,
happen?
maybe a day. I mean, I did said the new expansion for Elden Ring came out over the weekend, so I played video games and I did that over the weekend. And I think did I play any games Saturday? I don't think I played any board games Saturday. But I did Sunday because I was saying let's play games,
Yeah.
and I did yesterday, and I'll play games today and tomorrow and Thursday. Friday, I don't know if I'll play games Friday. Maybe
Are you playing
Saturday.
games in your sleep as well? Like it seems like you're always playing games, right?
No, but I mean, I again, everyone has the same amount of time.
Sure.
And so I sleep, I go to bed at 10 at night. I get up at 5 in the morning. I get up at 5 on the dot. From 5 to 6, I'm slowly waking up. That's just most people don't wake up like why to go. But I'm answering emails and doing boring stuff from 5 to 6. From 6 to 7, 15 or so, I spend time with my family. 7:15, I can run into work and I start recording videos as much as I can. Um, I don't know. I just constantly do stuff as quickly as I can.
As a team, do you get everyone together periodically to kind of map out where you're going to go for the next 5-10 years, or what kind of the next thing is on the horizon, or how have you kind of put that plan into place as to okay, now how does this trajectory go, and how does this continue to grow, and what direction are we going to go
Well, I hate meetings with the passion of 1,000 burning suns.
in?
As a former teacher, I think teacher meetings are the worst. In my church, I hate meetings at church, and I've made this very loud and clear. That being said, yes, sometimes we have to have meetings, and sometimes we have planning meetings. We don't have a ton of them. Um, but you said 5, 10 years? Never. I cannot usually think more than a year ahead. I just think, what can we do for this upcoming year? What can we do to make this next year better? Um, and I mean, some things I have to think farther ahead on, especially with the conventions, because you sign 2, 3, 4 year contracts,
Yeah.
with hotels and things. But with everything else, I'm very hesitant to go much farther than that because we don't know how the industry is going to change or how life is going to change or what's going to happen.
Have you set forth like anything like in the coming year? Like, is there anything that we can anticipate that's going to be new coming from you and your team at all, or
Not that I can
talk about?
say. I mean, I'm always thinking of new ideas and new things, and I implement them, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And I'm always trying to think, is this better than before? You know, I don't know. I just try new stuff out all the time. Uh, right now, again, my thought process is we're in con season, so there's all the conventions coming
Sure.
up. But also, you know, I'm thinking about what videos we're going to review, but it's usually all revolving around board games. So nothing like there's never anything mind blasting, but I have ideas. In fact, it was funny right before we came. I heard Alexa remind me of an idea I had like 8 months ago, and I told Alexa to remind me, and it did.
That's
And so I wrote
amazing.
it down.
Is there a limit to how far you can expand the cons? Like, is there thoughts to add like a Dice Tower North, like going to Canada, or
The
Dice Tower
number one
Europe?
question I get asked, when am I doing this? I think I'm at the limit for me
Yeah.
personally. 4 a year is a lot. Um, and I mean, I could do 6 a year probably, but then I would cut Gen Con and Essen, and I like going to those. They're important.
Yeah.
Um, there's a limit to what you can do. There's always a limit to everything. No, well, the sky's the limit. Whatever. Um, you can't outgrow. You can't buy your way into things. So you have to let things grow organically. You have to
Yeah.
work to make things grow. But I'm pretty happy with 4. I feel like 4 is my personal limit.
And the size of those, I imagine, will continue to grow. Like, do you see like the cruise eventually taking over the entire ship, or like I've got a friend that goes on that cruise. She's been on it twice now, and again, for anybody listening, she said it was amazing. They loved it. I mean, it's now her annual vacay is now the Dice Tower cruise. So, is and I think you guys have like half the boat or 2/3 the boat or something like this. Like, is it eventually?
No. Let's not exaggerate where we're at. I mean, first of all, I won't argue that. Yes, it's amazing. It's good. Yeah. I will say that with no humility. It's one of the best trips you'll ever go on. We have about 1/5 of the ship, maybe 1/4.
Okay.
And no, so see, the cruise is one where, we talk about growth, and I can't really grow the cruise much bigger than it is because there's space and size limitations. Yes, we could take over the whole boat, but the cruise does not allow you to go past, I think, 30%.
Oh, really?
And then they make you take over the whole boat. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's say I was going on a cruise and I'm like, hey, this is a rock cruise, and it's 70% of the boat, and I'm in the other 30%. And I don't want to go on a rock cruise, for example. Whatever. I mean, that might be some people's jam, but what I'm saying, just whatever. Think something you don't like, and that's what everyone on the cruise is doing. That would feel kind of like, you'd feel kind of, oh man, I'm kind of an outsider. So they make you do it. And for a con to jump up 3 or 4 times in size is pretty difficult. Most cons grow organically. So I'm not saying it won't happen, but I don't think so.
Where did the seed of that idea come from? Like, was it like, it's like, it makes sense now, but if you went back 10 years ago,
the guy who runs the cruise, Jason Levine, he kept saying, hey, let's go on a cruise. Board Game Geek does this cruise. Let's go on a cruise.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to go on a cruise because I didn't know anything about cruises. And I only know what I saw in movies and TV shows, and they look kind of boring. Everyone's laying around a pool.
Yeah.
And then something happened, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my whole family on a cruise. And so we went on a cruise, and I said, you know what? I'm not even going to bring board games. We're just going to go chill. I'll bring 4 board games. Well, we had so much free time on that cruise. The cruise, if you've never been on one, the amount of free time you have is insane. There's all kinds of cool things to do. There's shows to go to. There is the food. It's amazing. The islands you stop at, blah, blah, blah. But, there was extra time. I'm like, we could fill this in with board games. Jason was right. We should do our own board game cruise. So I came back and said, let's do it.
And they just took off from there. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
it did. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's fun.
So looking forward to this coming year. You're definitely going to be at Essen this coming year.
Yes, I have everything but the airplane tickets. But yes.
Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up when we're there as well. Tom, I want to thank you so much for being part of this 300th episode for us and helping us celebrate this milestone. Hopefully we can get you back maybe for the 400th. We'll see if I keep going at that point. But this has been amazing. There's so much I wanted to ask you that we couldn't get to. But I think
I told you.
Yeah, I know. You told me up front. You're like, there's no way you're going to get through all this. But we got enough to at least wet the beak, so to speak, and get us excited for the next time we have you on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate coming on. And for all those of you watching, hello and good morning.
Thanks again, Tom. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.